Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next session from the Data Science Institute. In today's session, I'm going to give you an in-depth overview on some of the hottest topics today. Most notably, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and its impact on any specific enterprise. But before we get started, let me run you through some of the logistics of the Data Science Institute webinars. We're going to get started with a few brief elements that everyone should know. First of all, note that the webinar today is being recorded. If you ask questions live, note that the recording will also be published online and will be made available to everyone who's watching, as well as on our social media platforms. Secondly, we strongly encourage you to ask questions. Throughout the entire session, there will be a Q&A box on the left-hand side of your screen where you can type any kinds of questions. Other participants will have the opportunity to upvote or downvote specific questions so that you have the opportunity to see and determine which questions you would like to get answered. And last but not least, note that the slides are going to be distributed after today's session. There's no need to make any photographs or screenshots because the full deck will be shared with everyone. So now that we have some of these logistics out of the way, let's get started with what we are going to talk about today. But before I do that, let me take a brief moment to introduce myself. My name is Jan Willem Middelburg. I'm the director at Sybient and the president of the Data Science Institute, which is making this session possible today. I do a lot of lectures, conference talks and webinars like the one today. And if I'm not doing any of this, one of my favorite activities is to write. On this screen, you see some of the books that I've published over the years. And today we're also going to be covering some of the key elements that are coming from the Enterprise Big Data Framework, as well as the AI Fundamentals Guide. So what are we going to talk about today? What I've prepared for you today is an agenda that is going to cover a little bit under the hood of what is happening within the domain of artificial intelligence. I'm quite sure that everyone knows the significance and importance of AI these days. And what I thought would be interesting to cover today is what are the developments within the AI domain, and also how you can practically use that within an organizational context. So we're going to start this session with a brief explanation of the concept of AI, but most importantly, how you can use it within an enterprise context. Then we're going to look at some of the key capabilities of artificial intelligence and specifically differentiate between narrow and more broader forms of artificial intelligence. And last but not least, I will cover some of the most common enterprise implications and showcase how you can start applying some of the things that we've covered throughout the session, and also explain in more detail what could be the next steps that everyone listening today can actually take. Now let's get started with a brief introduction of the organization that is making today's session possible. This webinar, together with some of the previous webinars that we've been hosting throughout this year, are facilitated by the Data Science Institute, better known as DASCIN. The Data Science Institute is an independent body of knowledge for the development and advancement of data best practices. And the Institute specializes in research, development of course materials, and making sure that the methodologies, practices, and processes underneath data science are being explained thoroughly for everyone who's interested and the whole community involved. In case you're interested in participating or working with the Data Science Institute, I strongly encourage you to check out their website at www.dascin.org, and the link is listed here on the slide. Good. As I just mentioned, the Data Science Institute does a lot of research and publishes a lot of white papers, books, case studies, and other kinds of research artifacts that lead to a better understanding of data and data science. Some of the key elements that we will be covering in today's session are coming from the AI Fundamentals book. And note that some of the models and slides that I'm going to be showing today are subject to intellectual property regulations. The book that you're seeing on the screen is part of the AI Fundamentals course list. And this course list, I will explain a little bit later, is giving you a more detailed deep dive into everything that's related to artificial intelligence. The subtitle of the book, therefore, is Core Concepts, Technologies, and Business Impact of AI. Good. Let me get started with sharing some research. And I think that everyone who's listening today, it will not be a big surprise that AI is significantly transforming and changing the world that we live in every single day. In order to illustrate that, there's two graphs that I always like to show that basically showcase this development quite quickly. On the left-hand side, you see a graph that is published by Google's research branch, and this shows the growth of AI use in the past 12 months, comparing 2023 and 2024 together. Now, 2025 has obviously not ended yet, but I think it's fair to say, even without having conducted any research in this field, is that you will see the bars in each region going up even more. AI is here to stay, and it's growing ever since its inception, and in my opinion, it's not going to stop anytime soon. And this is also reflected in the research that you see on the right. The projected growth in electricity demand and the percentage that is coming from AI and specifically data centers that power these kinds of solutions also keeps on growing. And that has all kinds of implications on the way that we need to start thinking smarter on the way that we deal with electricity, energy, but also with some of the costs that are involved with artificial intelligence, which I will cover a little bit later. So if there's one thing I would like you to take away from this slide is that the use of AI adoption, as well as all of its corresponding technology, is expected to keep growing. And I'm quite sure that most of you will have tried or are using AI tools on a daily basis. And for that reason, I thought it would be interesting to dive a little bit deeper today and make sure that you understand some key conceptual elements that are part of every AI journey. Now, before we get started, let's synchronize and make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes towards definitions. There's a lot of different interpretation around what is an intelligent system. Some definitions range from very philosophical to very technology-oriented to very much utility and outcome-oriented. And based on your definition, there's all kinds of limitations, different capabilities and elements that you can and or should at least consider. So before we start with any kind of AI discussion, it's always good to start with starting on the same page. And throughout this session, we will define AI as a machine-based system that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments. So note that in this definition, we're not specifically diving into anything autonomous or any form of higher power that is controlling this. We are just going to look at it from a machine-based, system-oriented approach. And the reason that we're using this definition is because it's published by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US, and is a broadly adopted way of looking at AI within a technology context. Now, let's dive a little bit into why this or why it or better said IT, matters in this specific element. First and foremost, it's important to note that when we talk about the usage of AI tools, there is a requirement to process large data sets to extract specific insights. And most people that are using any kind of large language model or generating pictures through the use of these kinds of interfaces don't necessarily realize that the amount of data necessary to train and create models that support this is very, very significant. Now, the other key element that AI leads towards, the utility definition, if you want to call it, is that it helps ultimately to improve decision-making and efficiency. With the use of AI tools, we are able to do things quicker, faster, with a speed that we were unable to work with a few years ago. And as a result, it drives all kinds of new technological innovations, development of new products and services, and is really accelerating the way in which we use technology into our everyday lives. And not only does it facilitate innovation, it also makes sure that we all have better experiences. It helps us find results that are more relevant. It helps us to create areas that are of interest to us. And overall, it enhances our overall customer experience. Now, these benefits are critical to understand, but also to start help shaping what it is that we would need within an organizational type of context. And that is why I would like to introduce you today towards the Enterprise Big Data Framework. Because in order to use technology and in order to use AI, you need to build it on a number of other capabilities. And what you see in this overview is that artificial intelligence is basically a cycle around a number of other capabilities. Most notably, data strategy, architecture, big data algorithms, processes, and different kinds of functions. And the reason why this is important is that AI connects or interconnects with all of these individually. And you cannot really just see or say that artificial intelligence is a standalone tool. It is related and integrates with all other kinds of systems. And especially if you would like to use it within an organizational domain, so not just for personal usage, you need to think about this. A common example I always like to use is think about data privacy laws or regulations when it comes towards copyright. Most AI solutions that are standalone and have been developed by third parties have slowly started to embed and integrate this. So if you're trying to generate a picture of something that is protected by intellectual property rights, the AI model will, or hopefully will, give you a response that is unable to do so. Now, if you are using AI within an enterprise context, this becomes even more relevant, because if you're not using AI within existing regulatory frameworks, within existing laws, it might open up the company for all kinds of legal trouble and potential lawsuits. And this is why this is so critically relevant. So the main message that I have for you today is that AI, if you're using it into a business context, brings additional levels of complexity. And the levels of complexity that you would need to take into consideration have a lot to do with the different components or capabilities that you see highlighted here on the screen. First and foremost, there is a direct relationship towards your data strategy, vision, and what you would like to achieve in terms of return on investment. Note that artificial intelligence tools cost a lot of money. And some of the solutions that you might have seen are very, truly expensive. So in order to make a business case and get a feasible return on investment, organizations are forced to think what they can get out of the use of AI systems. And obviously, that's not just generating cute pictures or just summarizing some text for individual employees. That will not warrant the investment and the costs associated with AI. Secondly, in order to train models and utilize and integrate them with your organizational data, you need to have an architecture that's able to support that. And this is where the second capability and integration comes in, the link towards a big data architecture. In this capability, you need to think about the way in which AI and large language models are going to integrate with your existing databases, the way information is trained and shared across your different platforms, and with which particular speed that is going to be made available. And that might sound simple when you think about it from an end user perspective. But in order to set up the enterprise data architecture to support those very large and search volumes and very quick requests for information, very advanced kind of architectures would need to be set up. Thirdly, you need to understand how specific questions lead towards specific results. Most people use AI as a black box. But if you would like to use it within an organizational domain and would like to train it on your own data, you will need to be able to evaluate what the AI model does, how it fabricates its result, and to which extent the outcomes can be trusted. And that requires every organization, or at least the IT departments, to know a little bit more around the underlying algorithms, how they work, and what their potential limitations are. And then fourthly, we already talked a little bit around that. In an organizational context, you are more bound to data governance and data security best practices. Not to even mention that you're bound by more strict laws and regulations, especially if you are working in a regulated industry. So the use of AI interacts with your data processes, and you cannot simply jeopardize data security and data privacy laws. Thinking about that and the way in which you're sharing information with other third parties is very critical for the use of artificial intelligence in any kind of organization. And then fifthly, you will see that artificial intelligence integrates with big data functions. And I typically like to refer to this as the people aspect and people component of data. Being able to use artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence solutions is not as straightforward as just typing in a specific prompt. It means that you need to understand and be able to validate outputs. It means that you need to know which information you can trust or not. So besides the fact that we need to have the technology working, we also need to be able to understand, trust, and be able to work with the outcomes of specific AI tools. And that is especially where a skilled workforce and data-driven culture comes into place. So I hope that you start to see by now that the use of AI within an enterprise or organizational context is significantly more complex than just using a specific standalone tool for individual use. So why did I bring this up before we dive into some of the practical aspects? First and foremost, I would like you to realize that AI runs on data, and that AI not just runs on data, it runs on big data. It's fair to say that big data is the foundational aspect or foundational element of any kind of AI model. And in order to make sure that you can utilize this in a cost-effective and efficient way, you need to think about your data architecture, specific technologies that enable that data to be processed efficiently, as well as this ongoing optimization and integration of your data architectures through automated pipelines and automated renewals. So in other words, AI and big data are correlated, closely related, and you can really not have a discussion around AI without understanding the underlying data sources first. And that leads me towards the first key takeaway from the session today. Note that almost all of us are using AI tools on a daily basis, but typically for individual use and for things that are fun. Think about creating poems, playing games, and making sure that we create cool pictures of cats that can count, as the one that you see on the slide right here, and which I generated. There's all kinds of funny kinds of use cases for that. But the fact that something works and that it leads towards nice results does not necessarily mean that it will have business value. So in order to scale AI towards being relevant and being applicable within an enterprise context, that is an entirely different story. There is a lot of elements to take into consideration, as we've just seen in the Enterprise Big Data Framework. But in order to use AI effectively, you will need to consider your data sources, where your data is coming from, governance aspects, as well as technological capabilities. All of these are areas that you need to take into consideration when it comes towards enterprise usage of artificial intelligence systems. So I hope that that kind of gives you some of the background and some of the necessity to start thinking about this. Now, what I would like to do in the second part of today's session is dive a little bit deeper into AI capabilities and to kind of paint the bigger picture of a model and framework that is very widely used, which is the distinction between narrow AI, general AI, as well as super intelligence. Because understanding this differentiation will also help you to place the technology and tools that you can or might be using on a daily basis into the right context, and allows you to start thinking about future possibilities and understand why so much time and money is being spent on researching these next kinds of technologies. Now, note that this is an evolutionary path. And what we mean with narrow AI is from a more task-focused, present-day solutioning purpose towards mimicking and simulating real human-like intelligence. And what we mean with human-like intelligence is simulating situations that truly act and think like human beings. Now, we're getting closer every single day towards that, but truly trying to find an AI system that can think and reason like a person is something that we're still a long way from. And then last but not least, there's the jump towards superintelligence, which is intelligence beyond the capabilities of individual humans. And this is the state, or the theoretical state, I should say, where big technology companies are spending billions of dollars to move towards that particular state. Now, this stage is obviously difficult to comprehend as a person because we are limited by our own human intelligence. So here think about ways in which, for instance, specific animals communicate, which we are unable to do as people. Now, this three-stage step is the envisioned, I would say, step-by-step approach that we see in the development of artificial intelligence. And it's fair to say that at this stage, we are only at the first initial steps of this. The present stage is what we refer to as narrow AI, which means artificial intelligence solutions which are built for the execution of specific tasks. And as such, we've developed great technology so far. Large language models, image generators, even video generators are very well structured and well suited to perform very specific tasks. But it also means that it's bounded by that task and task environment. These kinds of solutions excel in repetitive, more rule-based and data-driven work. And the common example here are all the virtual agents that we are using and seeing online. Think about your assistants, think about ChatGPT, think about the individual large language models that you might be using to generate pictures or even online videos. Now, the limitation of these kinds of systems is that they can only be updated by training a new model. And that's the, and what we mean with training is basically reprogramming or rerunning the algorithm to make better predictions towards the next stage. And this is the reason why we call it narrow. It is not able to absorb this by itself. It might be able to simulate some different contexts based on specific inputs, but that does not necessarily make the underlying model any kind of smarter. Now, a good example to illustrate this is through the different versions of GPT that we've seen in the last few years. Each version of GPT, 3, 4, 5, means we're at a new form or a new trained model. And in order to train a model, that's costing a tremendous amount of time, tremendous amount of money. But the system in itself will not be able to smartly think about anything unless it is prompted to actually execute this. And this right away brings me towards the next stage on the next frontier, if you want to call it, within AI, which is what we call strong or general AI. And what that means would be a system that is able to learn and apply knowledge across different domains and be able to reason and arrive at a better or new answer without the need for any form of retraining. A very famous way to test whether systems are intelligent is by the famous Turing test, which was set up by the famous computer scientist Alan Turing. For those of you who don't know who that is, go and watch the movie. But basically, this would mean that a person that is talking to either a machine or an individual would be unable to discern objectively or through correct ways whether they are actually conversing with a person or are conversing with a machine. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this, but you can try this with different large language models. And there are a few ways in which you can very easily identify whether the robot is trying to give you the right answer or whether it's a person that's actually trying to reason and learn new things. This is typically the constraint of large language models that we're seeing today. They're absolutely great at fabricating and creating controlled and truthful answers, but the reasoning aspect of adapting to new situations without retraining is in most cases simply impossible. So we're not even here yet, but I also would like to explain a little bit the last stage, or the stage what keeps all the big tech companies up at night, and that is the concept of superintelligence. What we mean with superintelligence is if we were able to build a system that would be able to not just mimic human decision making, but to surpass it in terms of cognitive function, in terms of creative or even emotional functions. Now, for us people, it is difficult to envision this because we are bounded by the limits of our own intelligence, and therefore it would be difficult to envision or understand what a system would be that would be able to surpass this. As I just mentioned, the example I always like to use is thinking about the way that communication sometimes works in the animal kingdom, and for which we as people are unable to even listen if it's at specific frequencies, or able to understand how specific animals communicate together. Now, a system that will be able to understand, detect, translate any kind of language across different species, or maybe not even earthly species, would be fitting the definition of super intelligence. If that were the case, and we were able to invent such a system, that would even provide us further room for rapid improvement. And this is famously called by Nick Bostrom the intelligence explosion, as you can see here on the slide. Obviously, this stage brings great benefits. There's also some pretty scary doom scenarios in this stage, but I'm going to leave that discussion towards another date. One thing to note is that scientists are still not entirely sure whether this stage will be possible at all, because the question whether people are able to create systems that can surpass their own natural intelligence is a question of that is up for philosophical debate. Anyway, I think that if you're working with AI in any kind of environment, that this is a key theory to know and to understand. So since we're slowly moving towards the end of our time together here today, what I've done is I've listed each of those three next to each other so that you have the bigger picture on the differences between narrow general AI as well as super intelligence and some of the key characteristics of each of those different areas. Good. I'm going to end with a quick discussion around some of the ethical and societal implications, because the use of AI systems should always be put into the context of ethics. With AI systems, it's easy to make predictions which are biased or that are contrary to fairness principles that we all uphold. AI systems plainly and factually just look at data sources, and therefore might sometimes lead towards undesirable behavior, which might be factually correct, but is not in line with societal norms. So this is something to always take into consideration, and is something that brings up a lot of ethics questions in research and development. Other key areas are of concern is the need for reskilling of people, the way in which AI and specific solutions are taking over jobs that provide income and security for people, as well as data privacy rules and regulations. In one of the previous webinars, I gave a full lecture on the implications of the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which explicitly prohibits specific actions to be undertaken by AI systems. And last but not least, take into account that the fact that something is legally allowed does not necessarily mean it's best practice and good governance within an organization. So when you're subject and using AI systems, these elements should also be taken into control. So some food for thought, and I can probably give a full lecture on these ethical and societal implications as well. But for today, we're going to leave you with these questions for you to think about. Now we're slowly moving towards the end of our time, but suppose that you're listening today and you think, how this is all very interesting, how can I get started and where to learn more? Well, first and foremost, note that the last question that I asked is a very common question that you see within the AI domain and leads towards a lot of ethics discussions. The Data Science Institute has published a white paper a few months back that is about the way and best practices in which you as an organization can set up an AI ethics framework. I've listed the QR code here on the screen, and with this QR code, you're able to download this specific white paper for free. So if you're interested in the more ethical side of AI, then this would be definitely a good read. Additionally, note that some of the key things that we covered today are coming from the Data Science Institute certifications. There's 2 different levels that are available: AI awareness as well as AI fundamentals. And the content of each of the courses is basically in line with the titles. AI awareness is more of an overview course that provides you with insights about what AI is and how it's working and what are some of the key terms. Whereas the AI fundamentals training goes much deeper underneath the hood and helps you to understand differences in the technologies and algorithms behind it. Think about the way that machine learning differentiates from deep learning or natural language processing, and what are some of the key algorithms behind each of those. As per usual, these certifications are completed with examinations by APMG International. Another key concept that I've covered in detail in this webinar was a discussion on the Enterprise Big Data Framework. If you want to read more about those 6 components that I showcased in the model, I strongly encourage you to download the Enterprise Big Data Professional book, which is a free guide available where you can download and read more about the capabilities of the Enterprise Big Data Framework. Similar to before, there's a QR code here on the screen, which you can use to get access to this free download as well. And that brings us to the end of our session right now. I'm now going to switch real quick and look at some of the questions that came in and try to see if I can find some clever answers to those questions individually. Let's look at that a little bit more in detail. Good. I see a few people ask some questions in the chat. The first question is, why is it important for enterprises to understand core principles of AI rather than just adopting tools? It's actually quite a good question. Let me think about that for a second. So the question is more around principles rather than tools. Well, I think if you understand the principles and the technology behind it, then the tools will logically follow. My experience has been that most people use AI as a black box. They have no idea how it works. They have no idea how the algorithms that are powering the results are created, and they blindly trust the output. And I think that last part is where the real danger is if you don't know how something inherently works, it is difficult to validate whether the input is truthful or you shouldn't be trusting it. So understanding some of the core principles first, that rather than just adopting a tool, basically establishes that you need to do your homework before you can start doing anything that is specifically related to the technology that you're actually using. Good. I hope that answers your question. Let's have a quick look at the second one. Why is it important for enterprises to build skills, and which are the most critical skills for professionals to develop? It's a very good question, and I think the most important answer here is that it's about understanding and literacy. And what I mean with that is being able to understand work and apply these kinds of solutions in a manner that you can trust. So data literacy, or sometimes referred to as AI literacy, is, I would say, the most critical skills in order to use this. Then one more question I see coming in: what excites you most about the next phases of this enterprise AI adoption? Oh, that's a good one. I would say that at this moment, in my belief, we are just at the very, very early stages of seeing and understanding the capabilities that AI brings. If you remember that ChatGPT was only launched around, I think, 3, maybe 4 years ago right now, and the rapid change that has brought around in the world, then it's fair to say that the implications of this are only just beginning. So what excites me most is that these kinds of systems will have the opportunity to solve very significant problems that exist in the world today. Think about poverty, think about hunger, think about climate discussions and changes that are on everyone's mind. So by using and leveraging intelligence in a better and sustainable way, I think we are able as a society, or as humankind, if you want to call it that way, to do more and to do more good with the help of computers. And if we are ever able to reach that level of super intelligence, we might even be able to use that to develop our societies to an entirely new level. So that's what really excites me the most. Good. I think that's a great way to end our discussion today and the overview. I would like to thank everyone for participating and joining our session today. As always, it's a true pleasure to host these webinars on behalf of the Data Science Institute. Keep a look at our calendar, and I hope to see you in any of our upcoming sessions again soon. Thank you very much.